It is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There's Ian Rivers, and it's cold outside, Ian, and it feels very cold as well for Bemidji State athletics right now. It's tough to get stuff going. They say, how do you kill speed? You freeze it. And right now, maybe that's kind of why things are happening at Bemidji State right now. Those cold temps, man, it is freezing. And it's just was overall not a great weekend for Bemidji State. And really take your pick. It's just one of those weekends, but Ian, other than that, how you feeling? You staying positive?
Yeah, it's positive as you can be. I mean, there's nothing. The sun rose today. There's nothing wrong with that.
Starting with the basics.
I don't want to get too down on it and make it seem like it's all doom and gloom just because the sports teams had a crummy weekend or a crummy stretch a couple weeks. But
at least the weather's beautiful outside.
Yeah, it's beautiful outside. I definitely wasn't outside last night in negative 43-degree wind chill, and this morning in 36. Yeah, it's been brutal.
Hoping to lose a finger and maybe get some money from the employer. That
could be.
But hey, on the positive side, Bemidji State football, I mean, the national champions, if you look at the math.
Yeah, the old
let me look up the name because
the transitive property, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. I was thinking of the circle of suck at first, which is the thing that commonly is used in NCAA hockey when inevitably they can create the entire circle of teams that have beaten one another. But
right, and it's just a complete circle of parity. Like, well, this team beat this team, so this team beat. Yeah, exactly. I'm looking up the official post that I believe Lucas put that out, right?
Lucas was the one that shared it. Yes, he, our friend over at Beaver Territory, basically using the transitive property to find Bemidji State's mountain to climb to the top of the NCAA football realm, which just wrapped up last night with Ohio State beating Notre Dame. And yeah, I don't know if you have it pulled up or not, but basically
it was like here.
All right, 14 different games or something like that to jump Bemidji State up all the way past Sioux Falls. Of course, Sioux Falls then helping us by beating a Division I team themselves, which of course St. Thomas had a pretty bad year. And then, I'm not going to sit here and read every one of them off for our audio listeners, but it climbs all the way from Bemidji State, Sioux Falls up to Michigan beating Ohio State, which then by transitive property means Bemidji State has beaten the national champion and is champions of the world, essentially.
Hang the banner. You know what I mean? Let's just hang it. We'll be done. We don't need to think anything of it. There was another year where this worked out. I think it was the year Clemson won the national title. I can't remember if it was in the first time they won it with the first title Dabo won. And I think that also had Bemidji State found a way to somehow, with the transitive property, be the best team in college football. So that was cool to have for a second there. So the second time that this has happened. So 2 banners that we need to make sure that we got hung up. So there you go. What are you talking about? This is a completely super positive show we got today, Ian.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. One of our more positive shows, actually.
Exactly. I mean, when you can talk about this, I mean, why talk about anything else?
I don't know. I don't know at this point, but yeah, brutal couple weeks, especially for our other teams, as I look behind me and see a Chargers banner and, the Vikings bowed out. I think the Vikings bowed out, and yeah, it's been tough. It's beating around the bush here. It's been tough. I don't know what you want to start with today, but
let's just go right into men's hockey. Let's go with that.
I mean, might as well. This is one of the more brutal weekends I can remember, CJ, in terms of just expectation over result, and it was just not there. And to be fair, I didn't watch the game on Friday. I've had a terrible streak of luck this year with plans on Friday evening. I feel like I've missed so many Friday hockey games this year, especially. And but I can't really complain, because you lose 4-1 to the 63rd team in the pairwise at that point. They eventually jumped up because they swept you, but
right. I mean, well, I got a little bit of the game on, so I was calling a basketball game, but I had the phone pulled up, and I at least was watching a little bit of that. And then on the laptop, I had the basketball game pulled up, the end of the men's game, beginning of the women's game. So I had a little bit of stuff set up. I obviously wasn't like super attentive, but like I could just kind of peek down every once in a while. If I had 30 seconds, I could just see what was going on. Get through the first period, you're like, okay, all right. Like you feel like you have some, it's nothing, and you're just kind of, whatever. You keep the thing rolling. You just figure out what's going on. And then all of a sudden you look up and we're down 1-0, and then you look down again and you're down 2-0, and and then I think I remember shutting it off. Just like, okay, all right. That's like, I don't know, man. It just was frustrating because we talked last week, and then Saturday, we'll get to Saturday in a second, but we talked, about last week about how these are gimme points. These are such an easy opportunity to start slingshotting yourself back into the conversation. And not that you're out of it by a big stretch, but you certainly, last year, they dug themselves the hole, and then they used this stretch to dig out of it. And it feels like they just keep digging.
Yeah, I mean, we had Jared on a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned that ever since he got to BSU, they've been a second half team. And that's true because he arrived, and last year was his first full year covering the hockey team. But I mean, 2 years before that, I believe we talked about the same thing. It's over and over. They get a good, they have a good first part of the season, and then they kind of just fall off come the second half of the year. And last year, it felt like everything kind of fell into place and the stars aligned at the right time. But this feels a little bit more of the same. And the problem is this year, you haven't built up that big stretch early in the season to at least say, all right, we're going to stumble into the 4 seed in the CCHA playoffs this season. Now you're stumbling and you're in 7th place. I mean, you won the McNaughton Cup last year, and now you're here in 7th place, approaching the end of January. And that's just a disaster. It's an absolute disaster, all things considered. I mean,
and 2 years ago, by the way, was mainly because of health, right? Like everybody got injured.
Yeah.
And there's been some injuries this year, to give them credit. Like there has been, but not to the level that there was a couple years ago. Like,
I can't think of a single player. I mean, maybe we don't really know what's going on with Carter Rancliffe, to be fair, if he's been a healthy scratch or if he's been injured. But that would be the only player, if he does have an injury right now, that is not at your disposal. And it's very disappointing. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know the X's and O's of hockey and exactly what this team is struggling to do. I know they're struggling to score goals.
I was going to say score goals might be the start.
I know they don't have – and the one thing that I have clarity on is Matthias Scholl. We've seen 3 years of Matthias Scholl being a good goaltender. And a weekend like this, where obviously it's disappointing for him to let in 7 goals to a Northern Michigan team, but I've seen him be a good goaltender in the past. I don't think that after 3 years, he just forgot how to play goalie for this team. So that to me means that the defensive core probably isn't doing their job very well in front of him. And again, that's just me using what knowledge I can infer based off of Saturday's game. And
by the way, remember when
over and giving up 2-on-1s, it's
right.
brutal.
I was going to say, remember when Matthias Scholl was hurt, and every time it's like, how is it we're 2 minutes into the game, we're already down 3-0. Like,
yeah, you look up at the scoreboard, there's 4 shots and 3 goals for the other team,
right.
And then Scholl comes back and all of a sudden that's not an issue. So that tells me that Scholl is not the issue with this team. And he seems to be the only thing showing any consistency. However,
there's only so much you could do.
4 goals on Friday night and 11 shots for Northern Michigan. At least that's what I'm seeing here on bsubeavers.com. 11 shots and 4 goals. That is a brutal. Now, I didn't watch the highlights of this, and I don't plan on going back and watching the highlights of this to reminisce on this game. But, I mean, it's just unbelievable. The team doesn't look like it has any juice. I mean, we've said that all season. Where's the goals going to come from? And I think I vastly overestimated. I know a lot of us did overestimated the amount of production we could see from these guys. Losing Eric Polkamp and Kyle Loaf certainly hurts your defensive core, but at least defensively, we felt like we had a solid core coming back. I mean, Mitch Wolf and Vince Corcoran have been solid offensive players, and maybe we thought one of them would take an offensive step. Issa Parek's come in and been actually really good. And then you have defensive stalwarts like Tony Fulmer and Will Magnuson, who don't necessarily provide the offensive structure you want from a defenseman, especially in Saratori's system. But you felt like they were at least good, solid defensive players. Patrick Satisari's looked good at times this year, but he's really struggled, especially this last weekend. AJ McCauley has not made the impact you wanted him to have coming into from Fairbanks this last season. And then offensively, it's just so inconsistent. I mean, Irie has picked it up ever since, I believe it was that Minnesota series. But even before that, he was struggling. Riley Funk has been one of your more consistent players offensively. And outside of that, it's been a lot of nothing. And it's been disappointing from a team that brought back so many guys. I mean, you lost Leighton Road and Carter Jones. Carter had a good year last year. And, of course, Leighton Road is probably going to be an NHL player very soon. That's a hard loss. But you had plenty of offensive talent come back, and it just has not lived up to the billing for any of these players. And it's extremely disappointing. And it all comes to the forefront in a weekend like this, where you have every expectation to go in and take 5 to 6 points minimum from this weekend. Like, even 2 wins in overtime would have been a little disappointing, because you're like, dang, if we could have just locked in a little bit and gotten that extra goal in regulation, we could have come up with 5 or 6 points from this weekend. You really needed to do that. And you look at what happened around the league this weekend, and it's honestly not super disappointing outside of your own arena, because, Bowling Green and Ferris State split, so you didn't lose too much ground there. Michigan Tech only took 2 points from Minnesota State, so you didn't lose too much ground there. St. Thomas took 4 points from Lake State. But you should be looking at this weekend saying, look at all these teams that split. We played Northern Michigan, a team that, granted, has been better. They've won 3 of their last 4 now, but this was your opportunity to get 6 points, and everybody else, like, you could have made up ground on Mankato. You could have made up a lot of ground on teams like Lake State, Bowling Green, Michigan Tech, that were all in front of you. And it just, I don't even know. It looked lifeless from what I saw at times on Saturday. I don't know. I don't know where it's going to come from. I don't know what you do, because it's not like Tom hasn't tried. I mean, they put some of these guys out there that are getting scratched in other weekends, but what do you expect them to do? They come in and it's not like they're lighting the world on fire. So it's just been kind of a whole offensive system failure. And I think that shows that a lot of years we rely maybe a little bit too much on our blue line to be offensive juggernauts. I mean, you look at how the Beavers were successful over the last couple of years, and it's been defensive oriented point scorers. The last 3 years, probably 2 of our top 3 scorers have been on the blue line, whether it's Zamolik and Rosen or whether it's, Polkamp and Loaf. It's got to come from somewhere, and it's not coming from anywhere right now. And then when you have to win every game 2-1 or 1-0, it's not a recipe for success. You cannot sustain that over the course of an entire season unless you have like the 85 Bears level defense on your hockey team.
Well, and we talk about this with women's soccer, I think was the other parallel is like, it's, you got to have some really good defense to be able to hang your hat on that. And for women's soccer, they typically have. For men's hockey this year, and we've talked about, again, goalie play has generally been good. And we kind of maybe lean a little bit more on, hey, the defense probably didn't give Scholl a good enough setup. And when you have a defense that's not rock solid, I mean, forget even whatever. It doesn't even need to be the best. Like, it's just not rock solid right now. And then, yeah, exactly. Like, hockey's a little bit more fluky than soccer can be with the bounces and the whatever. And that's what's led to this. I mean, look at the standings right now. Like, it's just not a good match. It's just not a good situation for the hockey team. I mean, as I'm trying to pull it up on the screen here. We'll see if I can get this thing up on our case, but nope, now we're having, there we go. There it is. Look at this. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the full CCHA standings as of 4 p.m. on Tuesday, the 21st. But like, I don't know what to make of this. Like there's a good weekend. They could leapfrog themselves, right? They could leapfrog a couple teams. They could get right back into some mixes. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility, but
the problem now is the fact that you don't have any faith to do it, because if you can't make up the points against Northern Michigan, where are you going to make up the points? Like I said this about the Chargers a couple of years ago, and I hate to bring the Chargers into it again, but I mean, they lost a game to the Raiders, who at the time were really bad. And I said to myself, I'm like, I mean, this team just lost to the Raiders. There's like 6 weeks left of the season. They're 500, but if we can't beat the Raiders, we can't make the playoffs. We got better teams than them coming down the pipeline. And if we can't beat them, and the good news is, if you want to keep that parallel, the Chargers did end up making the playoffs that year. Granted, when they got there, it wasn't good. They blew a 27-point lead in the playoffs, but they did get there. So maybe that can happen for Bemidji State. And I don't think that they're going to miss the playoffs. You have a 10-point buffer over NMU down at the bottom, and there's 10 games to go. So assuming that you don't have any more just monumental collapses.
It'd have to be a pretty bad collapse.
Yeah, but I do think that they're in jeopardy of getting an 8 seed right now. I mean, they have not played well over their last 3 CCHA weekends. They have a total of 5 points out of what would it be, 18 possible points from 3 weekends. If you go all the way back to that Michigan Tech series earlier before Christmas break, where they blew a lead at the end of that game, and then they got absolutely throttled on Saturday night. And we look back to last weekend against Bowling Green, CJ, and we kind of thought, all right, maybe this is kind of what they need, a little bit of motivation. They come back twice in the game, and they are lucky to steal 3 points from this weekend. Maybe it's the motivating factor that they need to kind of boost themselves into this final stretch run. And it was like, well, maybe that was actually just the team not being very good and getting lucky to get a couple of empty extra attacker goals, at the end of the game there to steal some points. But
maybe we should just pull the goalie at the beginning of a period. I don't know.
I don't understand. I mean, no disrespect to Northern Michigan, but they had 2 wins coming into this weekend. You went into Slater Ice Arena and took 3 points in each game, and you come home on your home ice and you can't get a single point. You scored 2 goals against Northern Michigan. It's very disappointing. I don't want to dwell on it for too long, but you're in 7th place, and it's looking ever more increasingly like you're not going to get a home ice spot. I don't foresee the top 2 teams right now. Minnesota State's probably just going to win the league, and Augustana is probably going to get home ice, because I don't see them slipping up against how mediocre the rest of this conference is. I don't see them slipping up enough to drop out of the top 4 at the very least. And then you've got to catch Michigan Tech and Lake State. St. Thomas looks a lot better. They've been unbeaten now in 6 games.
Hey, by the way, who does Bemidji State play this weekend?
Hey, they play St. Thomas. They got to go to St. Thomas Saturday and Sunday, by the way, because I believe St. Thomas Academy plays on Friday evening. So the ice will be being utilized on that evening. But it's a Saturday-Sunday series, and you go on the road. Now, you have owned St. Thomas since they've come to the D1 level, but you don't own anything right now. I mean,
you also played pretty good against Northern Michigan in recent years, relatively speaking.
Yeah, so. we got 5 out of 6 points last year, but we got 0 out of 6 this year, and it's disappointing. At this point, I mean, you just got to put it behind you. If you're the team, I mean, that's all you can do, is just what's done is done, and we have to focus on making sure that we can try to stay competitive, because the disappointing thing will still be the fact that if you get 6 points out of this weekend, you sweep St. Thomas and you look incredible doing it, cool, you're right back in the run for home ice. But now you're like, well, shit. I mean, even if we would have split with Northern Michigan, we'd probably already have home ice and we'd still be in contention for a 2 or a 3 seed, So it's always going to be there when you're looking back on it. But there's still 10 games left. You still have to kind of make sure that you don't slip down and get that 8 seed, or I don't even know, man. It's you just got to take it one weekend at a time at this point and focus on the team in front of you. Because when you're projecting out, when this team is inconsistent as it is, I mean, they're not even very inconsistent. They're just pretty consistently bad right now. And that's got to change if they want to have any chance at coming in and making any noise and getting, let alone making noise when we get there, getting to the Mason Cup playoffs.
I'm just going to, like you said, I don't want to beat the dead horse too much with the hockey team. Cause like, I think people listening, like, okay, we get it. Like, it's just not been great. And I think people watching that know that everybody feels that, but I just want to go back to the last time, Ian, just off the top of your head, when do you think was the last weekend you felt good about the team? Or like, do you think like the team, I think objectively after a weekend, you go, you know, a good weekend of hockey? Because when was it?
North Dakota?
That North Dakota, like that's, yeah. And by the way, lest you forget, that was November 29th and 30th. We've gone almost now, depending on how this weekend goes, we could go 2 calendar months without this team playing a complete weekend. Now, they've had some wins in there that obviously they split with Lake State. They had a shootout win over Michigan Tech. Like they had the weekend in Bowling Green that they had the weekend of, and Christmas break maybe makes this look worse than it is. But they haven't put together a good 2 games in a row of hockey in almost 2 calendar months. And that's just, again, if you have a team where it's like the expectations weren't whatever, like if this team was predicted to finish even middle of the pack in the league, you go, it's a little disappointing, but you know, nobody this team was expected to be towards the top of the conference this year. They have experience, and
it wasn't just us and our bias. I mean, you look at both the media poll and the coaches poll, and Bemidji State was first or second in either of those polls. So it's not like it was just all Beaver fans are talking out their rear end or something like, oh, you were never going to be that good. Like the entire conference expected you to be up at the top. And it was because you expected some of these guys to take jumps, and the underclassmen that you had coming back didn't necessarily take that jump. I think Irie has. I mean, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I believe he's still leading the team in points scored and maybe in goals. And he's had a good year offensively, albeit maybe a little inconsistent. But and then, you know, you got these fifth-year guys that come back, and they've been pretty disappointing. I can't really put it any more blunt than that. And so hopefully it turns around. You know, these guys have been there. They've done that. You just got to hope that you can come out of St. Thomas with, I mean, anything at this point. Take majority points. That'd be awesome. You know, keep your little win streak alive against St. Thomas. That would be hilarious.
Just please beat the Tommies. Just come on.
Right.
Give us.
I mean, I was so right about how bad St. Thomas was going to be this year, and I can't even enjoy it right now because
Ian,
we are
how many tweets do
below them in the standings. So
how many tweets from you smack talking them do you think St. Thomas fan accounts have bookmarked of yours? Do you think those are locked and loaded?
I mean, I don't really put it outside of the Discord that often. I put it in the Discord quite a bit. I haven't really been too public about my feelings about St. Thomas. I don't think anyway.
He's going to wait to put his full emotions out until after this weekend to see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens this weekend, and then maybe I'll make it public. But yeah, it's been a rough season so far for the men's hockey team. Hopefully they can turn it around. We're still optimistic. I do plan on being at the games in a couple of weeks against Ferris State. I haven't been to the Sanford Center yet this year. I was at 7 games total last year, and I've been to 1 in the Herb Brooks Center in St. Cloud. So do plan on getting up there for the Ferris State series in a couple of weeks. Hopefully the team is not trailing Ferris State in the standings when it comes to that after this weekend. But yeah.
Let's shift gears here. Let's talk a little women's hockey since we're on the subject. You know, again, we've talked about expectation levels and how it factors in and things like that. With women's hockey, we've talked all season about trying to kind of just see what we can make out of this. And some weekends have been better than others. I mean, currently the team sits at 420-1 overall. And, you know, if you look at the score of Friday afternoon's game, a 3-0 loss wasn't ideal. Saturday afternoon's game, they played great and just couldn't quite hang on. And it's frustrating because you lose to a team that's number 11 in the country. And again, there's just no break with this conference at all. But again, it's just one of those, like, they've had a couple games too beforehand where it's like you thought that they've played great. And I think the Penn State one comes to mind where it's like you skate with the team that's pretty highly ranked. You play pretty well, and maybe you could say played better at times than the other team. And just not having, whether it's young, whether it's just, them being a little more talented on the ice, just those few things where it's like you just can't quite find a way to hang on to the game. And maybe it's just, again, the program is in its infancy with Coach Frickland, and it's, for lack of a better term, you know what I mean? Like you see that with like young teams in the NFL and basketball and whatever, where it's like they're young and they don't quite know how to hold on to a lead or to go win a game. And you have to kind of learn how to, what creates winning? Is it the culture, or is it learning how to win? Like what creates what and all that kind of stuff. So, again, they had a chance on Saturday. That was probably their better chance to maybe steal a game. But overall, you have a clunker on Friday, you play okay on Saturday. And even though you don't come away with the win, at least you still have a little fight in you. And I think that's kind of what you take away out of the weekend.
Yeah. I mean, Saturday's a little disappointing. I'm not going to lie, because like I've been calling for, I wanted any points against somebody not named St. Thomas or Mankato. And honestly, I want some points against Mankato after how the first weekend went. This was your chance. You're up 2-0 in that game. Give up a couple power play goals in the second period, so it's tied 2-2, but you were headed into overtime with a chance to either take a point from an overtime loss or a shootout loss, or get a win in a shootout or overtime, and you give up a cheap little fast break at the end of the game, 2-on-1, I believe it was, and St. Cloud State buries it with 1 minute and 9 seconds left in the game, and you lose 3-2. And it's just extremely disappointing. You've seen this at a couple of instances this year where it's just like, man, we played well enough to get there and have those points or something like that. And so what you hope for is that in future years, hopefully as soon as next year, some of these games that end close like this start to tip your way. You know what I mean? Like maybe next year's team will get to overtime and steal 2 points from this game in a shootout win, or, that game against Penn State, like you said, maybe they'll be able to close that out a little bit better and not give up so many goals going out on the road like that in a little tournament. This year, it hasn't come to fruition, but this was a good chance to pick up some points. And honestly, the 11th ranked team isn't bad, but let's not act like the 11th ranked team in women's hockey is definitely not the same as like the 11th ranked team in like men's college basketball or something. The St. Cloud State was, I believe, 10, 8, and 4 coming into this weekend. Yeah, overall. And of course, a lot of that is due to the strength of schedule, because they, like us, are playing teams like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio State, Minnesota, Duluth every other weekend. So strength of schedule does play into that ranking. So I'm not going to take that away from them, but it's definitely not like you're playing a number 11 ranked Duke in men's basketball or something like that. But yeah, disappointing to have that end to the weekend, but at least you played 2 competitive games with St. Cloud on the road. I'm not too disappointed with that. You didn't get blown out in either of them. And yeah, I mean, you get to come and, go on the road now Friday at noon in Minneapolis at Ritter Arena. And then Saturday, you're going to Shakopee to play at 11:30 a.m. Hockey Day, Minnesota. That game is on. It says Bally Sports North. I do believe that it is no longer called Bally Sports North, correct?
No, it is now FanDuel Sports Network North. So it is FDSNN. Doesn't that just roll off the tongue?
Yes, absolutely. That is a wonderful thing to call a network. Yeah, but so of course, the Beaver Sports webpage still has Bally Sports North up there. It will be the same channel on your television set.
To be fair, it doesn't everything's the same.
It's a different name, I guess.
Make your jokes about the network. Now, the funny part is when FanDuel Sports Network became a thing, everybody freaked out and they're like, oh, the gambling companies are going too far, man. Mind you, that Bally is in itself a gambling company, but They did so bad at branding by putting themselves on this thing that even when they left, people still don't know who they are. And in fact, they incorporate like the Bally brand with the downfall of like Fox Sports North. So like not only is your brand not recognizable as a gambling company, it now has negative value because everybody associates it with like the thing that made me not be able to watch the Twins anymore on my cable package or something like that. So it's not really Beaver sports related, but it's just really funny. It's really funny how bad, like, we've taken sport. You took sport finance, right? Sports marketing, both.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, those are classes you take. There is probably going to be a chapter in one of those books about how bad of a deal that worked out for Bally.
Yeah.
So
yep.
Anyway, so that's something to think about. But yeah, they will be on that channel that always does Hockey Day, and go to the same one you go to every year. It'll be cool because even though the focus will be on the Gophers and it will be on Shakopee, I believe, is the official host. Yep. But there still might be a feature or two that talks about the women's hockey team. I'm sure there's going to be something talking about Coach Frickland coaching some of the national teams, like coaching some of those other teams.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure there'll be some love towards our way for Bemidji State stuff, but you might, if you find it online, you might need to bookmark it or something like that, because it's not going to be prominently featured, but hey, it's cool to still be a part of it, because I think this just makes me remember 6 years ago, Hockey Day, Minnesota,
especially with how cold it's been lately. That's a definite reminder of back.
It got so cold they decided we're never going back to Bemidji.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, hey, just play your best game when you're on. When you're in the spotlight, national television. When you're in the spotlight, you're on local statewide,
regional
television. Yeah, regional television. Play your best game. Go out there and shock the Gophers. Get a win in regulation, 6-0. It's easy. Just do it in the net. Just score goals and don't allow goals.
Yeah,
it's so simple. Why wouldn't you just do that every game?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Ian's just being offered a consulting job for the team as we speak.
Yes. I have been actually.
He's just finding the highlight clips and just looking at the parts where they give up goals and see, don't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that anymore. This is not a good thing. We have to stop this.
And then immediately his consultation job got dried up. But the point is that one day, was pretty fun. While we're on the subject of Hockey Day, I think, and we talk about the Bemidji Hockey Day too, we got to be on campus. I remember I think this is just a good time to wrap up our hockey by talking about this, just to add a little fun into this, because it's been just a not great, unless there's anything women's hockey wanted to add before we move on. But Hockey Day Minnesota is fun. And it's a cool tradition. It's a cool thing that gets to happen. Bemidji State has gotten to be in it a few different times, roughly. But, this time, obviously, the women's hockey team is down in Shakopee playing the Gophers. But when Hockey Day Minnesota was in Bemidji, I remember the year before when they got announced as the host site, we did the radio show, R&B Sports Talk, on KBSB, the student radio station there. And we were super excited for what that opportunity could be. And it was so cool, literally, out on Lake Bemidji, getting to see that atmosphere. I had to work some basketball games, so I missed most of it, but that's okay because it was 30 below outside. You got to go to a little bit more than I did. What was your experience like with Hockey Day Minnesota when it was in Bemidji? How fun was that?
It was awesome. I mean, the thing that sucked is the fact that it was just so cold, and I was a little bit underdressed at the time. I wasn't quite prepared for how cold it was. I knew it was cold, but I'm yeah, okay. Big coat, hat, mittens, we're fine. And I didn't bring my bibs for whatever reason, and I would have been totally fine had I brought them, but I just didn't think to do it. So it's you're waiting in line for a porta potty so you can get out of the wind for 3 minutes while you go to the bathroom, and you're standing huddled next to the big fires, or you're going in the tent when you can. But it was still a very cool experience, and it was awesome to see, the community of Bemidji get together like that and experience the hockey that we got to experience. The one thing I do regret is not toughing the elements to go to I believe it was a game on Thursday night. It was really weird between Bemidji State and Michigan Tech, where Bemidji native Dylan Eichstadt scored the game-winning overtime goal in that game. As cold as it was, I still wish that I would have none of my roommates were going, and it's oh gosh, who would I even go with? Do I go by myself? Do I keep asking around campus to see if anybody's going to go? I didn't go to that, and I regret it, especially because of how the game ended. But hey, you live and you learn, I guess. But yeah, it was a super cool experience. just being able to be there and do that. It's not something that I do very often. It just doesn't really line up with my schedule a lot of times. And honestly, a lot of times I just kind of zone out on it. And then I'm like, oh shoot, is it hockey day tomorrow or whatever? And then I'm like, oh gosh, I should have planned it out, because Shakopee ultimately isn't that far from where I'm at. So I could have probably gone down this year had I planned out my schedule a little better. But yeah, it being in Bemidji was awesome. And I hope that they do get another chance at some point. Because yeah, it was cold, but it was cold everywhere in the state, that weekend. It would have still been a pretty miserable event, even if you had it down near Shakopee area or somewhere down in Mankato. It still would have been cold. It just wouldn't have been, oh, well, now we can blame it on the cold and we don't ever have to go back to Bemidji. It's like, well, no, it's a good hockey community and you should definitely go back there. But
right.
Yeah.
The problem is there's just so many good hockey communities in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, that exactly.
You just went to the back of the line and you're just it's going to take a while
to get back to the front. Exactly.
So I can't wait for Hockey Day Minnesota 2048 when Bemidji finally gets another bite at the apple. But when it does, we'll be there ready to roll. I always remember people, because obviously working in the mass comm department, we remember a lot of people who worked like doing production for the game, and everybody just basically talking about how they're lucky to have fingers and toes by the time they got done working it, and equipment was freezing up and they had to like bring it into a tent at times just to get some stuff to warm up. And it was brutally cold, but it was just super fun. And it's one of those things where now that you're done with it, and I understand it's a safety risk, but now that you're done with it, you can look back and be like, oh yeah, that was cool. That was awesome. Like that was a cool scene. Obviously Hockey Day's not done outside and really anymore. Obviously a lot of the events are brought inside for safety reasons and stuff like that. And with a week like this, it's understandable. But to be one of the last hockey days where a lot of stuff was truly outside is also pretty darn cool. And of course, it all gets capped off with the Minnesota Wild game that night too, which, Ian, grab a puck, grab a stick, lace up your skates, because due to injuries, you are now the fourth line for the Minnesota Wild.
Right. Yeah, that's been brutal. I mean, they played well last night. They beat the Avs, local boy, Brock Faber, with a goal and a really big game. I think he played like 28 minutes or something like that.
He missed all that time, and they're like, you're catching back up.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, Hockey Day is awesome. Hopefully we can have some more experiences like that very soon.
Yeah, you got the good vibes in. We good. We got them all. We're going to talk a little men's basketball. The good news for that team is that John Sutherland did come back, and at least on the game on he came back in that game on Saturday, and it was needed because they fell to Concordia by just a couple points. But overall, and I believe he was back for both games over the weekend, which was good. But unfortunately, again, you stumble a little bit out of the gate and you end up losing both of your games on the weekend. And I remember I missed most of them. I was getting ready to call a game, so I didn't catch a lot of the men's game on Friday night. But I remember just kind of, you can go, and if you're watching the live stream, it's really cool because I just left when they started to implement this for taking stats for college games. It's like NCAA wide. When you do these stats, like you also do a shot chart as well electronically. So you point, like when you take the stat, you have to tap on the area of the court where the guy shot the ball or girl. And then you look through the list of like possible options, and Bemidji State just could not hit a three in the first half, and Duluth was able to hit a bunch. And that kind of was the story of the first half. And you just got, it just ended up not working out for you that night. And you kind of take it, whatever. That's 3-point shooting. Outside shooting has been something that's been tough, but you're down 12 points at half. And even though you played much better in the second half, ultimately you still lose. Sutherland was the leading scorer with 15 points, and you move on to another night. But again, shot 19% from three, where Minnesota Duluth shot 45%. And this is multiple weekends where we talk about, your opponent shot really well from beyond the 3-point line. And we say, okay, there is a point of like a team has a good game and you tip your cap and you go, you know what? You had a good 3-point shooting game. That'll happen. Good game. We'll play it next time. We doubt you'll be able to shoot that well again. But when you have multiple effort nights like this, where a team is shooting as well as they are from beyond the 3-point line, now it starts to tread into, okay, yeah, maybe they are still getting lucky. That could still very well be a thing. And maybe it was. But then you're also like, okay, but what are the shots you're allowing, or how are they getting open? Are they are they consistently good looks that are high percentage? And that's where you start to drift into, well, now you're giving up shots that are super makeable and you're getting a bunch of threes rained on you. And I think it's starting to creep more towards that second one.
Yeah, it's just been a combination of poor 3-point shooting and poor 3-point defense has been the main issue. I mean, yeah, you brought it up this weekend. They went 5 of 26 on 3-point shots, and then they come back on Saturday and they go, 6 of 24. So maybe if you stink at shooting 3-point shots, stop chucking up so many 3-point shots. And yeah, I mean, Duluth shot 45%, which is an insane clip on Friday night, at least from 3-point range. And then it was a more lowly 33% from Concordia St. Paul. And it's just, it stinks. You know, we talk about it from the women's hockey perspective of, man, some of these games you just wish when you're close, you want to be able to pull those out. And it's the same with men's basketball. There's been so many close calls. I mean, you look back at the schedule and how many games we lost, like where we really were in it right at the end of the game. I mean, this one is one. You had a couple of bad stretches here, towards the middle of this season. But, there's a lot of games early in this conference season. Minot State, Minnesota Crookston are two that come to mind. Minnesota State Moorhead, you were in that game late. It's just, you're not pulling out any of these close games. And it's really starting to hurt you when you go on big losing streaks like this. This is now 5 games in a row that the team has lost. And unfortunately, I mean, the schedule doesn't really lighten up. You have 2 really tough teams. Are they at home this weekend or are they on the road? They're at home in Bemidji.
They come back home.
But you've got to play the number 1 team in the conference, Southwest Minnesota State, at 15-3 overall. And then Sioux Falls is 11-7 overall. But you compare that to your 6-12 overall, and it doesn't look like a very favorable matchup either game for you. So hopefully you can pull off some wins this weekend. But yeah, it's just, it's been tough. And I mean, the one thing I can point to is Sutherland played well offensively this weekend. So it's good to get him back. But the team had 4 second chance points, and that's on 11 offensive rebounds. So that's probably like 2 out of 11 when you get an offensive rebound. That's not really a good enough clip to be shooting at. If you get those second opportunities, you got to put the ball in the net. And that's a difficult thing, especially when you lose by 2. When a stat sticks out like that, it's pretty easy to point to that and say, if we could have done that just a little bit better, we might have won this game. But yeah, hopefully they can pick up a win or 2 this weekend and kind of shock the conference, because it's like you look at the teams that they've played and it hasn't mattered. I mean, we talked about how good this Concordia team was, and they were still within 2 of them. They played Concordia St. Paul close. They played Minot State close. Those are 2 of the top 3 teams in the conference right now. So they can play with anybody in this conference. They just don't seem to have the consistency to do it night in and night out. And hopefully they can find that come the end of the season, because in a lot of sports, it doesn't matter when you get hot. It matters when you get hot, I should say. It doesn't matter that you get hot. It matters that you get hot at the right time. And if they can get hot towards the end of the season, going into the NSIC tournament, which they hopefully can make, that'll be a good thing. Going a little playoff run again as a lower seed, fine by me.
Yeah, I mean, and going back to, obviously, Friday night was Friday night's issue, but then on Saturday you got down 7-0 right out of the gate, and against a team like Concordia St. Paul, again, they're receiving votes. They're a good team. Yeah, if you don't start off that game on a 7-0 run, you probably win. On the bad end of a 7-0 run, and it's just there's been some good performances in there. Obviously, Sutherland had his season high 23 points. Tate Olson's had some double doubles, and I believe 3 out of the last 5 games. So you have some guys that are putting up some good performances, but like you mentioned, it's, you think okay, they drop a game to a team that's lower in the conference, but then they play a team towards the top, like Concordia St. Paul. And then all of a sudden they don't quite they don't quite win, but they're close and they're competitive. And like we talked about with men's hockey, this was a team that was not expected to finish maybe at like the exact tippy top of the conference, but this team was expected to finish in the upper half. Like this was expected to be a competitive men's basketball team, not a team that, as I, just kind of sift through the standings here, wasn't expected to be like 12th in the conference, 13th in the conference, like in that bottom tier. And so they are talented and they've been injured and Sutherland's been hurt. And that is true. And they have not been playing at full strength, and he's back. And it's obviously it's going to take him a little bit to get fully into John Sutherland form, but I think it just kind of culminates together. And it's just disappointing because this talent is there. This is a team that can run with anybody in the conference. And again, the tale of, two halves putting them together and trying to figure it out. You again give up the 7-0 run in the first half to start the game. You enter halftime down by 7 points, and then in the second half you outscored them. So it's just that case of putting two really good halves of basketball together, and they still just haven't quite been able to do that. They're on the precipice, and they're probably going to get a win at some point this season where we go, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Or like that would be an upset. That's probably coming down the pipe, and we shouldn't be surprised by that because they are talented. It's just frustrating when, I didn't expect them to be like third in the conference at this point in the season, but at least maybe like 7th or 8th, I felt like was much more attainable,
Yeah, I really didn't feel like we would be sitting here in late January and stressing on whether or not we were going to make the NSIC tournament for sure. So hopefully this team can get it turned around because it's been a stressful couple weeks here trying to pick and claw and see where the wins are going to come from. And like I said, they just haven't picked up any of those close wins. So hopefully, I do think you're right. At some point later on this season or this weekend, hopefully against Southwest, we can see this team pick up a win that makes us go, wow, really? Bemidji beat Southwest? Like, that's crazy. And at the end of the day, it's really not that crazy because this team had expectations coming into the year. They just haven't lived up to them yet. So hopefully we get to see that pretty soon.
Exactly. Let's wrap up the show talking about a little women's basketball over the weekend. And again, we talked about, hey, there's maybe an opportunity for them to, again, they felt like, maybe getting a split on the weekend was in play. If I remember kind of our conversation from last week correctly, that we felt like, there's an opportunity there to do a little bit. And as I'm, again, trying to wait for some pages to pull up to get my official stat here that I was searching for. But overall on the weekend, you face a good team, obviously in Concordia St. Paul. But we felt like that Friday night game was the game to win against Minnesota Duluth. And again, I was peeking up and down at that game. I can't tell you like any specific plays or who jumped out on the page, but the team was running right at halftime, and it felt like they had some moments right before halftime. Bemidji State looked like they were going to get like a multi-score lead, and it felt like they were kind of going to have a good advantage to go into the locker room with, for lack of a better term. And they end up going into halftime, again, slightly ahead, but it's that second half where things just kind of fall apart. And I thought they really had a good opportunity at the end of the first half to try and get in that spot. I believe it was tied going into halftime. And Minnesota Duluth was able to it was back and forth, like teams going, it was like a track meet for a little bit there towards the end of that half. And Minnesota Duluth was able to kind of recover and go into halftime tied. And then they just took that second half and was able to kind of use it to lift them up. And that's pretty much the story of the game. And that's the one where, again, you go into that game, Minnesota Duluth was 4-7, or they leave the game 4-7. You leave 2-9. That felt like a game closer to the conference where you can maybe snag a win. And going on the road, Romano Gym is never the easiest place to play, but just again, a game maybe you thought you could have came away with that you didn't quite get away with. And Concordia St. Paul is just they're an excellent team towards the top of the conference. That one was always going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that sticks out is, again, it's just a dreadful shooting weekend for the Beavers. It's just, you look at Friday night's game, they shot under 40% from the field at 39.3, 21% from the three-point line, and then you bump over to Saturday, it's 38% from the field with a 13% clip from the three-point arc. Or I'm sorry, that's Concordia St. Paul. That's the weird thing to me. Bemidji State, 32% from the field, 22%, so around the same 3-point percentage. But yeah, Concordia St. Paul shot just terribly in this game. 38%, 13%, 3 of 22 on three-pointers. I'm trying to figure out where it went wrong. I mean, I know that, like you said, Concordia is a really good team on the women's side and the men's side this year, but it's just really the stats are kind of lining up here that, I mean, they shot more than you, quite a bit more than you. They had like 15 or so, 17 more shot attempts than you. So that explains a little bit of the shooting percentage can be a little bit lower if you put up more shots because you're going to make more. But yeah, it just felt like a weekend that it wasn't, the offense was not clicking for BSU. And of course, like you said, that Friday night game stinks when you had the opportunity, like you said, to carry some momentum into halftime, go in with a lead against a team you're kind of hoping to catch up to in the standings, and then to let it slip away in the second half like you did. And team's got to get some wins soon. Hopefully they can keep up. They've got another tough game. I mean, it's kind of similar to the men's side, SMSU, one of the top teams in the conference. That's pretty par for the course for SMSU on the women's side, especially, and then a middle of the pack 6-6 Sioux Falls team at 10-9 overall. So again, you're going to look to get anything you can from this weekend. This team did last year at times pull off wins. So we're like, oh, okay, yep. But it was unfortunately for that team just a little bit too late in the season to make a difference in the standings. So hopefully this team can pick up some more wins and stay competitive and try to get up towards that 12 seed, but got to take it a weekend at a time. And it starts this weekend at home. They have some interesting games this weekend. It's a slam dunk. Don't drive drunk is Friday evening against Southwest Minnesota State. And then it is alumni weekend. So they'll be doing a blackout on a Saturday against Sioux Falls in the BSU gymnasium. So if you're on campus, you want to stay warm, go to a basketball game. We got some home action this weekend for the men's and women's team.
Yeah, men's hockey at home, men's and women's basketball coming home, or men's hockey is on the road. That's right, yep. Exactly. So at last weekend's thought on the mind. So yeah, I mean it's a good opportunity to go in. Both hockey teams are out of town. Go in and watch some basketball at the BSU gymnasium and. There you go. Cheer them on to a couple wins. Somebody's going to get a win where we're going to be like, this was a fun game. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about. We are going to have that. We are staying faithful. You just you have one of these weekends every once in a while throughout the sports season. We're here for the times that aren't so good and for the times that are good here on the Beaver Banter podcast. Ian, anything else anything Beaver related before we wrap up the podcast?
I don't think so. Hopefully this weekend is better than the last, but the good thing is, I guess it's hard to go down from where we're at right now after that, especially like you said, it'd be totally different if, the men's hockey team had played because that's the one that's really women's hockey played a tough team on the road, men's and women's hoops. I mean, yeah, they could have maybe picked up one win, but they're still difficult to go into Duluth and win those games. And Concordia is really good. It's the men's hockey team getting swept at home by Northern Michigan. That's really the one that's got you down. And like you said, weekends like this are going to happen, but hopefully this weekend is better and we can get some wins for these programs and get them turned back in the right direction heading towards the playoffs.
That's how we're feeling, getting the positivity rolling, heading into the end of the week. Let's roll Beavs, and we'll be back here next week. This is the Beaver Banter